raised. Ask yourself, were you ever raised with shaming parents? We're going to do a whole series on shame. And this is where it begins. The other day I was talking to my son Solomon, and my wife mentioned to me, Steve, that was bordering on shaming the boy. Well, what do you expect? That's how I was raised. It wasn't about feelings or things that are desires. It was about, did you do the right thing or the wrong thing? If you did the right thing, hey, it's what you're supposed to do. You did the wrong thing, we were shamed and beaten with a board or a belt, which would have been classified as pure child abuse today. All right. So anyway, some of us come into the world and we have some shame built in from parenting. These idiot parents, I would like to slap them in the name of Jesus. And then I would ask them to turn their other cheek, and I'd do it again. But anyway, they think it's a good idea to tell a child, you'll never amount to anything, because that's going to motivate them to amount to something. Horrible. They tell kids you're a failure, you're a disappointment. It's just the worst thing ever. So it can imprint us with shame messages that stick with us all of our lives. Other people feel shame because they set out to do something and they failed. Their parents wanted them to go to college all their lives, and then they go to college and it's not for them. And they feel ashamed because they failed. Or they get a job, they get fired. Or they start a business and it goes under. Tremendous shame. I live here in Indiana, and when the economy tanked, I think it was back in like 2008 or 9, and the car industry just went to nothing. There was a guy whose name was on almost every dealership around here, and we got the news. He killed himself because he was ashamed because all of those dealerships went bankrupt. What a sad thing. There's another kind of shame, and it's the kind of shame that could actually help us. And that's when we do something that's inappropriate, we feel something, it's not right, that's shame or guilt, some people call it. But when we're ashamed of ourselves, it could result in us being motivated to change our behavior. The worst thing would be you didn't feel anything. You didn't think it was wrong because kind of your conscience was severed a bit. Well, you don't ever want that to happen. That'd be horrible. But God does say that He'll give us over to our desires and passions and lusts, and we'll no longer feel that regret or shame or remorse. Then, I think that there's probably another kind of shame where you really have done something, but you've never ever lived in God's grace and experienced God's forgiveness. So I would just ask you to stop and think, what is the source of your shame? Is it something in the past? Is it something in the present? Is it something from childhood? Is it a failure in your adolescent or adult years? What is it? Because if we could get rid of that shame, we could really, we could experience some things that we'll never experience in it. I've told this story before, but I'm a teaching pastor at Northview Church, and we have campuses in 4 Indiana prisons. We passed out 3,200 Take Your Life Back books to all the prisoners, all of the staff, and the warden. When I was there, I met a guy. He was looked like late 20s, and I asked him why he was there. Good-looking guy, tall, handsome. He said, I became a Christian, and the next morning I walked down to the police station, and I turned myself in because I had been having sex with a 12-year-old girl. And I think he was like 22 at the time. So he was raping this 12-year-old girl, is what they call it. So he turns himself in, and they sentence him. I think this prison, it was a sex offender prison. I think he was sentenced to 30, and he was doing 15 years. Well, if you did that, you could have all sorts of shame, but he really did feel that God had forgiven him. And I got word back that as a way of making things right, doing something redemptive, he took every man's battle, and he's not deaf, and no one in his family's deaf or blind or anything like that, but he translated it into Braille, and it's in the Library of Congress, his translation, Braille translation. And when I met him, he was as free of shame as I have ever seen anybody, because he had done the right thing. Of course, I told him, I think you're more courageous than any other man I've ever met. Because most of us would have just said, oh, well, I did that before I was a Christian, and now I'll just go on about my business. But he wanted to pay the price. What a price. I understand he's getting his degree in psychology while he's in there. You don't do those things if you're still feeling shame. You see, you just think you're second class, you're undeserving, and you just settle for whatever comes your way. I don't want that for you. So we're going to do a series on shame, and I hope and pray that when we're done, this terrorist that's on board a lot of people's lives is going to find somebody else to pick on. I'll see you next time. Thanks for joining me. And if you need some help, it's 1-800-NEW-LIFE. And we've got this great book where we focus on shame, the Emotional Freedom Workbook. And then Chris Williams and I are going to be doing the Emotional Freedom Workshop. You can find that 1-800-NEW-LIFE, newlife.com. Thanks for joining me. And until next time, look out for that shame. It could really mess you up.